Mike, you know what I love? Every time we start talking about movies, it veers off into what will be a great idea for a movie. And then we go off for a half an hour tangent about some movie we never actually are going to make.
That's very true. And I think on a daily basis, I come across at least 5 or 6 different ideas that I want to make into a movie, and I never do. But yeah, that's true.
That is true. But the nice thing is, if you start looking at B movies like I do all the time, you realize we could make all these movies nowadays and we could make them on an iPhone.
Absolutely. Oh my god, dude, you can totally do literally everything, sound, video, and images all on your phones, totally.
Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of the Fabula Obscura podcast, Movie Madness. So, the movie that we're going to talk about today, Mike, I think is your favorite movie of all time, if I'm not mistaken, but it's Constantine.
So, it's funny because this is actually your favorite movie. You, every time we talk about movies and we talk about wanting to talk about movies, you're like, "Hey, let's do an entire episode on Constantine." Every time.
Look, I'm not going to lie, I'm a big fan of Juan Constantine. This is one of those things where I don't know why it is, but I just keep going back to that movie. Like The Matrix, it's one of those movies where I come back to it all the time and I reference it all the time as part of pop culture or
Yeah.
stuff like that. You'd be surprised how many people out there have not seen this movie.
The Matrix or Constantine?
Constantine. I feel like most people have seen The Matrix, but Constantine is one of those where like I'll bring it up and at least half the time people will be like, "What are you talking about?"
I can't imagine that. Yeah, that movie came out in '03. That's 21 years, give or take, whatever. That's
Yeah,
a
it's
long
been it's
time.
been a long time.
I saw that when I was in college. Actually, I went with, I'm not gonna say his name, but one of the editors of the newspaper had free passes, and because they were gonna go in and do an editorial on the movie in the the newspaper. So he's, "Hey, I got a bunch of passes. You wanna go?" So me and my girlfriend at the time, and then him and his chick went, the 4 of us went out there, and it was so much fun, dude. That movie was so good.
It's so good. And that's the thing, right? So I guess we should start with, as we said, right? This movie's old, right? 20 something years old. It's
Yep.
not a new movie. If you haven't seen this movie yet, go watch it.
Well,
You can
lots.
stream it online pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, it's not like a very big twisty type movie in terms of what actually happens, but at the same time, though, like from beginning to end, the story is just good.
Yeah. And there will be spoilers. Just so you know up front, there will be spoilers. We're going to talk about a couple of things in there. All right. So, Constantine, Mike, how would you summarize the plot for Constantine?
Constantine is about an exorcist who is essentially trying to barter his way to heaven. At some point in his past, he attempted suicide. If your soul is taken via suicide, you go straight to hell. He is essentially trying to save innocent souls as a way to pay for his way back into heaven once he dies. And then
Right.
all while that's going on, he has lung cancer, he smokes, and he's got less than a few months to live. So
Exactly. And that's one of the other things I wanted to talk about was if you remember back in this era, like 20 years ago, and it's not so much now because things have changed, right? Now we're 20 something years later, but back then, smoking was a really big thing. And even prior to that, right? And that was the era where there was a lot of anti smoking commercials, legislation. It was like this massive public outcry against smoking. And
big tobacco.
um, we're old enough to remember when people smoked everywhere,
Oh yeah.
malls, hell.
I remember when my cousin Eddie went to school, they had a smoking area for the students.
Yeah, exactly. So we're old enough to remember when smoking was normal, quote unquote, and then this movie landed right around that era where like the public backlash started happening. And then now, of course, like they've killed smoking pretty much everywhere.
I feel like
Um,
nowadays though, people are smoking less tobacco and more other stuff.
we'll just leave it at that. Family friendly podcast. But yes, that's where, it changed. And so, yeah, I was thinking about that when, we were talking about this earlier, was that they put that into this movie, like the black tar in his lungs, right? When you see it at a couple of points in the movie, it was super interesting. But yeah, your summary is on point. Like an exorcist trying to barter his way. And by the way, the thing that I find funny is nowhere in the movie did Constantine ever talk to God, and we never actually saw an interaction with it, other than like the very end where there was kind of that one scene where he's like floating away.
Yeah.
But he assumed that he could barter his way out of hell by doing this, but there was no guarantee. And so that kind of tells you that he was at the point where he had nothing left to lose. So his only hope was to try to do this so that he wouldn't go to hell.
Is it a matter of his only hope, or was that, you think, his best chance?
I think it's both his best chance and his only hope. Because, like I said, I never saw it anywhere in the movie referenced or even implied that he had made this deal with God. This was just like him trying to do something and end up in hell.
In fact, there's a scene with him and Gabriel, played by Tilda Swinton, which is awesome. Which is, I like the whole gender bending thing. I thought that was really cool.
Mhm.
But there's a scene with the two of them talking, and she specifically says, "You have seen and you've talked to God. You've been in His presence. He exists. Having faith and knowing are two different things." And
Exactly.
and he's trying to say, I know God exists. So maybe the fact that he knows for sure God is there, that he feels like that somehow solidifies his plans and confirms the steps that if he does what he needs to do, that he'll get his end goal. To your point, like, he never made the arrangement.
Mhm.
Why assume that's going to be what happens?
That there's an implicit arrangement there, right? Because Gabriel says something also later on about that God loves humans so much and that all they have to do is atone and they can go into his ever loving bosom or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
And so, like, you could also assume that he is taking that at face value and saying, if I just do good and atone, because that's his atonement, right?
Then I should
That
be forgiven.
that he would be forgiven and go into heaven or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, that's a really great summary. That's exactly what the thing is. But what's funny is you take that summary of the plot that you just gave, which is an excellent summary, and it's exactly what the movie's about. But yet the movie is just so much more than that. Like, it is so deep as far as the message that it sends, the different things in there. So, like, some of the things I wanted to talk about were recurring themes in the movie. So one of them you brought up was Gabriel. And yes, it was super interesting that they had a woman play Gabriel. I thought that was amazing. I had never seen that kind of interpretation before. And that there's a lot of discussion about just the angels in general, because there's like certain references to them in historical context, biblical or otherwise. And there's a lot of ambiguity there. So it would make sense that that from an artistic standpoint, right? If you were a film creator here, you
Yeah.
would use like an androgynous or an ambiguous version of Gabriel to highlight that, right? That it's not set in stone. Whereas if you, what was the movie, the other one we talked about where, was it Gabriel? Michael came down and he was trying to protect the woman that was pregnant.
Legion.
Legion. There you go.
Yeah.
Where that one is more of a by the book historical account, if you want to, representation of what happened. Of course, it's like a completely different story.
But
But
have you ever seen what angels actually look like if they were to be biblically accurate?
I did see something a while back about that. It was actually written by, I want to say it was a Catholic priest. I could be wrong about that.
Mm.
That basically made the argument that when the Bible says that we were made in the image and likeness of God, and the fact that God doesn't have a body and he's never been depicted or represented anywhere from an official or a canon perspective, it's actually a reference to the soul of the human being equivalent to the soul of God, and not talking about the body. Even though they said image and likeness, there is in fact no image and likeness. Same thing goes with angels. I've seen like I read a book one time that was talking about how they in fact do not have wings, because wings were just humans' interpretation of something that was able to hover or fly, exist
Alien.
above the ground, so to speak. And
I'm
that,
not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
yeah, and so like they were trying to make the argument that these were just actually balls of light, basically, that were like hovering around. And then of course, you know, over the years, humanity applies our own interpretation to that, and that's how you get the modern
Yeah,
image
have
of
to
what an
make it
angel.
palatable for themselves. That's all they've done is
Yeah.
essentially just muted down the image into something the likeness of humanity, and then at that, it's whatever. I think that this is the general, again, from the artistic standpoint. Where I think women are viewed as more beautiful than men, therefore having more feminine features, more curvy, more light, and that's versus the grit, the wrinkles of man or the hair of man. Those are not as
Hmm.
essential. So you see like this pinnacle of whatever the best, the most purest form of humanity. They look at a woman, and then having a woman's form, even as a man, Did you know that Michelangelo, when he painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, he used all men as
Mhm.
far as the figures? In fact, they even said that they thought he was gay too, because he apparently had a few male lovers.
Yeah, it turns out that historians are going back and looking at this kind of stuff, and they're starting to think that there's a lot of historical figures, specifically artists, scientists,
Renaissance.
and others, yeah, that were experimenting in other ways beyond their art and their science. And yes, I even read something a while back, an article that was arguing that Christopher Columbus was as well. Um,
Wow.
so it's interesting, and read that about the Sistine Chapel as well. And it definitely, as a matter of fact, I had even read somewhere, and of course, this could be debunked at this point. I don't know, but the Mona Lisa was actually um, the man originally, and then he like
Really?
put the feminine features on it.
I never heard that.
Yeah. So again, none of us were alive to see
Little
it or to
nerd,
know it, but
you crazy guy.
yeah, but it does make sense that because you think about it, if you're an artist, especially in that era where artists could actually make a living because they had wealthy benefactors that would pay them to do their craft, they would do whatever the benefactor told them as far as paint the Sistine Chapel. But whenever they were working on their own projects, they wanted to do creative things that were completely different. And so they would do these things that were just like experiments with artwork or whatever. And of course, nowadays we look back on that and realize, hey, this is very different than what a person did on the Sistine Chapel. And it's, yeah, somebody paid for one of those,
And
right? So
it's funny you say that because there's this like whole conspiracy circles that are popping up now of people saying that if you look at architecture from like the 1920s, 1900s, even the late 1800s, the detail and the craftsmanship that are in architecture then compared to the stuff that is being put out now, they're simply saying, oh, humans were obviously being helped by alien beings or something back then, and that's why we're incapable of creating such architectural marvels now. I'm like, we just don't do it now because no one's willing to pay for it. That's all it is.
pay for it and the time, like doing
Yeah.
that, because you remember back then they did that by hand, and
Yes.
it took, in some cases years
Yeah.
to make, right? And what person nowadays has the attention span or time or whatever to work on something tirelessly for years other than an academic or a researcher who like devotes their entire life to whatever their field of study is, right?
Exactly.
It's super rare. But I did, speaking of the whole like alien thing and the conspiracy thing, I find that funny, and I'm not going to even delve into that in this episode. But what I did find interesting recently was I saw a video the other day online with an article. I don't remember, I want to say it was on some major news media site, but it was basically showing how they had taken uh, a robotic arm with a drill attachment to it and hooked it up to an AI, like an LLM.
Okay.
They were basically having it recarve like the prolific statues of the Renaissance era out of marble, and it was doing them flawlessly.
Wow.
Yeah. So think about that. Like, and to your point, right? So we're talking about, I know we, joke about it being a conspiracy or whatever with aliens, but to your point, imagine that this technology existed before. They were using it, right? And that's how these things were actually formed.
Yeah. Look at the pyramids. People, that drives me bananas, man. When people are trying to say that a couple hundred guys with rope and chunks of wood are moving 10, 15-ton blocks, and then doing it 100,000 times over a period of what, a couple years, maybe?
It was years, like in some cases, decades, like
That's the thing,
projects.
though, that they
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah. None of us were. And what's crazy is I've seen interviews with, I guess you would call them construction foremen or whatever, like people who know about construction. And they're like, we
Right.
couldn't do that with the heavy equipment we have today.
Exactly.
Like when they build modern buildings, our building blocks have to be smaller to accommodate the machinery that
Which
we
is to
have,
carry them around.
because it all ties together. But like you said, that was one of the things that kind of drew my attention here with Constantine, was like they draw all of these parallels and these kind of links to all this other stuff in the world. And you're watching it and you're like, man, this is super impressive. I also like that the movie took place in LA, because I think LA is a very unique place. I've been there many times. I've lived
Hawthorne,
there.
shout
44
out to
Hawthorne.
the 4-5.
Shout out to the bus driver on the 44 Hawthorne route.
Yeah.
You're the man. LA is an interesting place. I've gone there many times. I live up in the Bay Area, but I do go down there pretty frequently, at least a couple of times a year. And I like the fact that they hit all these different places in LA. Now, I can't say that every single place was filmed in LA, but obviously the movie was made to be in LA.
No, yeah.
And specifically because, right? And I'm gonna drop something here for that is super obvious, but I need to say it. Los Angeles,
No.
right? The city of angels,
Yeah.
right? And so this entire movie, you got Gabriel and then Lucifer, you've got the fallen angel, right? Like the whole thing is about angels and demons, if you want to
Oh,
look,
it's
which
true.
we will talk about angels and demons at some point too. I love that book series.
Dan Brown.
But yes, Los Angeles, the city of angels, right? That's what the whole thing is about. So yeah, I'm glad that they put all that pulled together because you had both sides of the coin. You had the good angels and the fallen angels all in the same movie. You mentioned one of the actresses that was in there, which she did a bang up job with Gabriel. Like super props to that one.
Those were-
Obviously, the most prolific actor of our time, Keanu Reeves. Although someone could argue The Rock is up there too.
Are we going to
But-
discuss your bromances with these two gentlemen?
We're not going to discuss that.
I have one question for you, Ernest.
Ahead,
If
Mike.
you wanted to, who would be the hottest of the two, Keanu Reeves or The Rock Johnson? Who would you go out on a date with?
I wouldn't go out on a date with either of them. Who would I hang out with? Who would I go to a bar with and just hang out and
Word.
Man, it's a tie because I like them both. Like they're both like Keanu Reeves and The Rock to me, as far as I know right now, everybody's a human being, right? Everybody has their flaws or whatever, but they're like two just genuinely good humans, both of them, right?
Yeah.
Like good hearts, both of them. So I would go out with both of them to have a drink or whatever and talk. I feel like, man, it's hard. I can't even pick one of them. I feel like Keanu Reeves would be like the more introspective and the one that you'd have a deeper conversation with. But The Rock would be the one that you just have a hell of a good time.
I can see that. Because I
Yeah,
think with
like-
The Rock, you can see everyone else around the bar coming to join you versus with Keanu Reeves, it's just like you said, like just this introspective, personal kind of conversation. But I think
Yeah.
it'd be legit. If I had Jim Carrey,
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves, and me just sitting at a bar, just having beers together and talking about life, and just existence, and just I think that would be so cool, man.
That would
Rob-
be dude, Robin Williams. Yes.
my God.
Unfortunately, we can't, do that. But yeah, like, The Rock to me is like, I've always loved The Rock since back in his wrestling days when I used to watch wrestling before I
Yeah.
found out it was fake.
So sorry.
I know I was heartbroken when that happened because, man, I loved it. And look, don't get me wrong. Like you can still enjoy it now knowing it's fake, right? I'm not saying you can't, but it's just like, to me, that took away, I don't know. There was like it was almost competitive sport type thing. Once you find out, like, it's like when you find out that some referee in the NFL is on the take and has been being paid to throw the game.
It breaks your heart a little bit because you wanted to.
You're like, man, that sucks. But I mean, we're talking about human beings here, right? This happens all the time.
Yes.
What I would love to see though, and I doubt this will ever happen, but if either Keanu Reeves or The Rock happens to watch this episode, a movie with both of them in it
Dude.
would be bonkers. Like, just
Give DC a little time because I can see when they're not DC, Marvel, it's got to be Marvel because he pretty much burned his bridges with DC.
yeah.
The Rock, because he was all like, I'm not going to do it unless I'm Superman. He didn't want to be, he wanted to be Superman. They said, no, we're not doing that.
I get it. If you were gonna have a Superman,
But
The
see,
Rock,
yeah.
I don't know. He would be a good Batman too.
I think that his image is too commercialized now. Jumanji took him over. He's too Target toy aisle actor. That's what he
true.
is now.
I actually want to see the live action with Moana with him in it.
Is that happening?
Anyway, I assume it is because Disney is like doing live actions of everything.
They're doing
And-
Lilo and Stitch. Weird.
I am one of those people who is like against the live action things. I don't like them in general, but in this one case, because it's The Rock, I'm like, okay, that's cool.
I'll go
I would
watch it.
do it. And look, I have nothing against Will Smith. I think he's a cool guy too, but Robin Williams not being the genie really hurt. You know what? Like it was like, man, and I know why they couldn't do it. Like, I'm not saying that, that this was like a bad decision or whatever. It was just, I really wanted him to do the live action if they were going to do it, right? Because it's Disney, right?
Yeah.
Let's be real here. Disney's a merchandising behemoth, right?
Oh, yeah, they are.
Which is the reason they love The Rock, because you can merchandise him until the cows come.
Sure.
So,
Now, seeing him in a Star Wars thing, I wonder what that would be like.
that would be interesting too, seeing him in a Star Wars thing. You know what? The Hulk. Disney has done the Hulk dirty
Oh, my
so much.
Let's rewind here, sir. Don't blame Disney, because to be fair, there were two Hulk movies before. Those two movies were bad. The
Mhm.
first movie, Eric Bana, was focused so much on the story, which is cool because this is the first legitimate Hulk superhero movie that we're getting at this point in time. This is
Lou
what,
Ferrigno.
yeah, but that was a TV show, and that was like the
Yeah,
780s. So
just
what were we talking about? I feel like I was
the, we were off of Constantine and onto the Hulk movies at this point.
oh,
Bringing this back to Constantine, which is what we're supposed to be talking about.
when we're back to
I was reading a thing the other day that the prop that they use for the holy shotgun
Mhm.
is actually something that Keanu Reeves had bought and given to the director of the film as like a gift.
That's pretty cool.
And that was actually my favorite parts of that movie was when he got that shotgun and just started going ham on all those demons with it,
Yep.
the possessed people. That was such a good action sequence
Well,
right there.
one with the cross, right? Hell yeah.
Yes, the holy shotgun. That thing was, man, that thing was awesome. Um, all gold and then the cross. It's like an opulent piece you would expect to see
In the
in
Vatican.
a church if it wasn't a gun.
So you would definitely see it in the Vatican.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's sitting right behind the altar.
Dude, the Pope, he's got like right behind his desk.
Yeah. If you try to come in there and mess with him, he's gonna take care of business.
He's like, you said what about Jesus?
Exactly. You ready to meet him? Here it is.
That's funny.
Yeah. The obviously that our talk about Constantine wavered into other things, but I did give a warning at the beginning of this episode saying, hey, you know what happens when we start talking about movies? We just wander off for half an hour in some random direction. So
Those are the best conversations, sir.
they really are. And so hopefully our audience appreciates that. Well, let's bring it back to Constantine because there's a couple of things I wanted to get your thoughts on. One of them is a recurring theme of the movie in real life. If you follow this kind of like paranormal occult type stuff, which is the Spear of Destiny. Talk to me about the Spear of Destiny, Mike. What was it in this movie? And then like, how have you run across it outside of the movie?
So Spear of Destiny as a item is the spear end of a lance that was used to finally end the life of Jesus Christ, or at least so it says. As any other artifacts that pertain to Jesus and that were involved in the crucifixion, they've all been in real life. They've all been categorized and kept in archives, like in the Vatican and other Christian,
Like the Shroud of
holy places.
Turin and other
Exactly,
things.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've even seen that they've had shards of wood from the actual cross that are kept secret, whatever. So essentially, the Spear of Destiny, this lance, this chunk of metal, is said to have magical properties. To the extent that I'm pretty sure that Hitler actually had a lot of people looking for this because he wanted it for himself, because he was obsessed with the occult, and he thought that as soon as he received this and he obtained this item, that he himself would then become the ruler of the world and just be unstoppable and take over. Now,
Exactly.
come back into the movie now. It starts out with a man just walking through some kind of deserted area. I believe it's in Mexico somewhere. And his foot goes through a hole, finds this box by mistake, and it's this something wrapped up in a flag, and pulls it out. And he's, oh, look, this is the Spear of Destiny. He doesn't realize that, but it's what he received.
Mm-hmm.
So he's holding it in his hand. He's, what am I going to do with this? And as he's walking, I love movies that open up with these boom moments to like get your attention. Okay, I'm stuck. I'm here. Let's go. And he's there walking and do, and all of a sudden a car just goes and hits him. But instead of him being thrown or the car being like blood splatter everywhere, he is just solid and does not move. But this car just goes like waffles into him.
Yeah, the front of the car is destroyed.
Absolutely.
And he's just standing there holding that spear.
Untouched, unaffected, unbruised. And he just, oh, okay. And he just turns around and just continues on walking. This begins this journey to find, I guess he's being spoken to, or something is telling him to get to this destination where he's there to.
Yeah, it's very much Lord of the Rings, where the One Ring is trying to get back to Sauron.
Exactly.
He is trying to get back to the son of Satan so that he can complete the ritual that births him into the world, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And yeah, to your point, right? Hitler had this obsession with what was termed the Wunderwaffen, or the wonder weapon, right?
Oh.
And mind you, this goes into all other areas of conspiracy, because there's this supposition that he was working with aliens to create this super weapon, this like floating, I think it was called Glocker or something like that, a floating bell that was some kind of a super weapon.
It
And
was
it all ties
integral.
together. So he had this obsession with supposed historical artifacts that would grant him unlimited power and that he would be able to take over the world and all this stuff. So yes, the Spear of Destiny, it does make sense in that context that he had people looking for it. Now, again, whether or not it exists and whether or not it would be able to be found, and if it did, if it had those properties, who knows? But there were quite a few things he was after that, again, in his mind, he believed would give him the unlimited power to be able to just take over the world. But yeah, another thing that was interesting about that scene, that first scene, is not only does the guy get hit and just keep walking, but he jumps a fence and walks into a pasture and there's all these cows in there.
The
And
gun.
as he's walking through, the ground is just like turning black and the cows are just falling over, dying like next to him.
Yeah.
And like what it signified to me at least was like pestilence from the book of Revelation, right? As he threw, it's just like stuff is just dying around him. And he's like, again, like you said, he's trying to make his way back to, I guess in this case, LA, right? To complete this
The
summoning ritual or whatever it is, right? So that was pretty interesting. So Spirit of Destiny is one that I really enjoyed. The other one was, and this one you probably keyed off on too, was like I don't remember the exact term, but it was basically the Devil's Bible or Satan's Bible. So yeah, tell us about where this thing popped up in the movie and why it was important, and then where in real life or outside of the movie have you run across that?
So the way they refer to it in the movie is that there's a Bible in hell. So they don't specify that in the Devil's Bible. It's simply just saying there is a version of the Bible, but it is in hell. And apparently this version has extra chapters that the original Bible does not have. So in the scene, I can't remember, it was a correct quote of something, but I don't remember the number. But she makes the woman actress in the movie, played by Rachel Weisz, she makes comments saying the Corinthians doesn't go that high in the number of chapters. He says, yeah, but it does in the Bible in hell. And she's like, there's a Bible in hell? So they referred to this other Bible. Now, it's funny, going back to the stickiness or the tarry blackness you were talking about earlier when they were referring to hell, Beeman, who is also his friend, had a copy of the Hell Bible in Urs. And when he was trying to peel the pages, it was like this plastic, it was like this adhesive, sticky, gritty looking nastiness, whatever. The book essentially said that in order for the Devil's Son to progress into the living world, he has to have help from the divine. Because he needs help from God, he doesn't go directly to God, he goes to Gabriel. Spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually would be the twist. That would be the spoiled. Anyway, so that's the book there in the movie. Now, in real life, there is such a thing as the Codex Gigas. It's a book that is something along the lines of a good 2.5 feet by maybe 2 feet long and wide, and a good 4 or 5 inches deep. This is a volume of information that was written. Now, the legend behind the book is a Franciscan monk apparently did something, and as a penance for his soul, the devil said, okay, I'll let you live and I'll let you keep your soul, but you have to write this book for me, and you have to do it overnight within a 24-hour period, and it has to be like perfect. So the monk wrote the book. And there are people that have said that it scanned the pages and scan the text and get an idea of how much work should have been put into it. They said something like, if a person worked 24 hours a day, one person, they might get it done in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it all in one night. And the reason they call it, aside from the story behind it, there's actually a page in the book that there's a depiction of the devil. He apparently painted this and he's saying, this is what the devil looks like. And so I think it's in some museum somewhere, but at this point it's 700 years old, 600 or 700, something like that. But yeah, so that's the Gigas, the Bible Gigas, or the
and that's interesting too, right? Because again, the thing that I keep coming back to with this movie is, usually when people talk about things from a religious context, right, especially coming from biblical, Christian, and more specifically Catholic context, right, everything is looked at as two completely separate things. And what I mean by that is there is heaven and there is hell, and they are diametric opposites of each other.
dichotomy.
There's a dichotomy, and one is inherently good, one is inherently evil. There's like the two don't mix, they don't intertwine, and you're supposed to like take this one path, and then the other path is like constantly trying to pull you over there. And so like your work or whatever your job as a human being is to choose the right path and do the right thing.
Mm.
But what I love about Constantine is how they blend the two together. And it's almost like the upside down in Stranger Things, where they try to like say, actually, it's two sides of the same coin. So like you have the concept of heaven and hell, but on Earth, like Earth is where the war between the two is going, and they're like playing this game with each other. But you have a Bible, and then you have a Bible in hell, which is like the opposite side of it.
As
And
above,
the same,
so below.
yeah, exactly. So it's like this interesting thing where they pull the things together, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And then you go through the movie like that. Yeah, the Bible in hell was super interesting. The thing it reminded me of, and I know some people are going to give a little bit of backlash on this, but I think our viewers and listeners will not, because they'll get this, is the Bible as we know it today, the modern day Bible, was assembled, right? So there was a council of bishops.
Are we going to have this
called
conversation?
the Council of Nicaea, where they summoned all these bishops together to assemble all of these texts together into what will be the modern day Bible that everyone knows today, Old Testament, New Testament.
Yeah.
And that's common knowledge. What a lot of people don't know is that in that assembling of the book that they use today, a lot of stuff was left out. As a matter of fact, I would say more text was left out than was included.
Yeah.
And we weren't alive during that time, so we don't know why that was the case, but it's just the way it is.
I feel like we can assume to know what their intention was behind doing that. If they're trying to control information and trying to filter out what people see and what they don't see, I feel like they probably had a very specific message that they were trying to put across.
It's the thing, right? So what a lot of people may not know is that council was assembled at the behest of Constantine, which is, again, we're tying back to this movie, a pagan emperor who paid for a lot of these. Because back then, remember, when these bishops came to congregate to put this together, they came in from all over the world. It isn't like today where someone just got on a 787 Dreamliner and flew in, right?
Yeah.
They had to come by boat, horse, whatever.
Years to get over there.
There were no trains, right? They had to actually travel, and part of it by foot, I'm sure. And so this costed money, right? So in order to make this happen, this had to be funded by somebody. And in this case, it was funded by a pagan emperor who then converted to Christianity on his deathbed in order to unite his kingdom, right? So you put all of this together, and that, obviously the movie's named Constantine, but you put it all together, and it's an interesting depiction of how this all tied together in this movie. On the one hand, there might be some individuals who consider the concepts in the movie blasphemous or whatever, but on the other hand, what it's actually doing is taking the story that's known, but then taking the part that is unknown, or at least unspoken of, and like opening that part up for people to look into it and to talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Bible in hell, that was super interesting. And then one of the next things is a kind of core concept here. Now, I'm not exactly sure with non-Catholic Christian faiths. There are many of them.
Right.
And I'm sure it's similar to Catholicism, where suicide is an automatic trip to hell, basically.
Right.
To the point where I'm sure you've encountered this. I know I've encountered it myself, where some Catholic priests will refuse to perform a funeral for a person who committed suicide because in their belief, that person cannot be saved by
All
heaven.
of their sins or whatever.
And I'm not going to judge their judgment of somebody else. But what I will say is that does play into this movie in a major way, because the twin sister of Rachel Weisz's character, the detective, committed suicide. And obviously, because of the faith, she went to hell. This is another interesting part I wanted you to key in on, because you and I had talked about this the other day, where she gets all these clues that her sister went to hell, but she refuses to believe that her sister committed suicide simply because suicide would mean an automatic trip to hell. It wasn't because she didn't believe her sister had mental illness or some other thing that would have driven her to suicide. It's because the consequences of that were too much for her to bear. Right. So at a certain point, Constantine says, let's find out, paraphrasing here. So let's talk about this scene, Mike, where he goes into her apartment. Tell us about this scene where he goes to find out whether or not she actually went to hell.
I'm an exorcist. This is what I do. So he says, I'm going to eat some items. And he gets, I think, a pot, half filled of water, and her cat. Do you remember what the cat's name was?
No.
Duck.
Duck?
Yeah. Cat's name was Duck.
Interesting.
Tell me again how I watched this movie. You watched this movie more than me. I was like,
Mhm.
anyway. So yeah, so essentially what he's trying to do, or she thinks that he's gonna look into the water and maybe see something and have a portal into hell and view, whatever. I don't know what's she thinking at this point. But he's okay. I'm gonna need you to walk out of the room for a moment while I do this. And this is my apartment. And he's, do you want to get it done or not?
Mm.
And I love the way they did this because it's like this moment of time, right? So where it's, if you think about time as a whole in terms of relativity, like a one split second, like is a identifiable, quantifiable amount of time, but within that span of time, you can stretch it out to something that's to be broken down
To
even
an eternity,
smaller, to
literally.
an eternity. Again, in this one split second, she walks out the door and she's about to close the door. And then they do this slow mo shot of the door handle and then slows down right when it gets to this point and it stops. And
Yeah,
at
you
that,
literally see her hair moving, and then it
yes,
just stops.
like it flows in the air and it just like freezes in mid
Yes.
frame and then cut. And it's like, boom, he's now, I guess what, his feet are inside the bucket. He's holding his cat, looking dead in the eyes of the cat, and
Mhm,
even pulls like their face back a little bit to get the eyes to pop out a little bit more. And he's like looking
mhm.
at him in the eyes, and then bam, he's in hell. And he's like physically in this, there's like wind blowing.
It's a hellscape, right? It looks like any other hellscape, like typical movie depictions of a nuclear blast.
Yes, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it
Yeah,
like that, but that makes sense.
yeah.
Huh. Maybe that is hell. Hell is nothing but a constant atomic bomb blast.
I mean, it makes sense, but yeah, like you said, the time just freezes, and then he goes into hell. And my favorite part is like his eject mechanism that he took with him just in case, so he can get back out.
Oh yeah, because it's a little bubble of holy water from the Vatican,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
so essentially, like so he well while he's going through, he's sees these demons. You
Yeah.
know, I wonder if there's any kind of lore behind that.
I don't know, but they do have their nose because they're going around sniffing,
They're
like trying to
yeah,
sniff him to figure out like if he belongs there or whatever.
that's weird. I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about it. So he gets there and he's like looking for some evidence. How does he find the?
It's blowing on the wind. And so he's looking for the evidence, right? And then if I'm not mistaken, like you see a vision of her like jumping off the building and ripping
The
the thing
hospital
they put on the hospital wrist thing they put on you,
identification?
ripping it off and tossing it, and then it's flying in the wind, and those demons are like catching on to the fact that he doesn't belong there,
Yeah,
and they're
and they
trying to
started
catch him. And
chasing him.
he runs, and he like jumps, grabs that thing in midair, and then pops the vial on his chest,
Like it is one
and then
shot. It's like there, and it's funny because all the demons are like crawling up this hill, and he's literally in the center, just this perfect shot.
And then he pops the vial, and that's like his escape hatch, right? He gets out,
And then
and
bam,
then
he's back at the in real life, and he's steaming and hot. But in that split second when she was walking out the door, time continues. She starts hearing him cough. She
yep,
rips the door open, and in that half a second that she didn't even experience anything, he was there, gone, did the thing, came back, and fall. Time
yep,
relativity, man. This is also another testament to how I feel like hell and heaven may be just alternate dimensions or places further out in space because of the time dilation.
yeah. And then the thing that I love that throughout the movie and throughout the interaction between Constantine and I can't remember her character's name,
It's
Elizabeth,
Isabel.
Isabel. Okay, she's a devout Catholic, right? So
Yeah.
she has what you would consider absolute faith. But then when you get to the stuff that Constantine talks about, which is like this stuff around hell and the devil and all that, it's almost like she's a skeptic. So on the one hand, she's a devout Catholic, but also a skeptic of the same universe and story that are playing out at the same time. So it's she has blinders on basically.
Yeah.
He's trying to open up her eyes to it, and she refuses to until this scene when he has the thing in his hand and he hands it to her. She's in hell. She committed suicide and she cannot accept any of this. But I feel like this is the scene where she finally accepts it.
But I
That,
mean, isn't it like though? I hate to say this, but I was speaking to my own family members that are Catholics that are shown something right to their face, proof that this is not right, but they're like, no, I don't believe that.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like this movie is expertly told because highlights that people will believe what they want to believe regardless of what is there. But then at a certain point, right, they have no choice but to accept what has happened or accept reality. And they will fight it, right? In this case,
Angela.
Angela, right? City of Angels, Los
Ah,
Angeles. See,
interesting.
the storytelling is excellent here.
Multiple
This is the
layers,
part,
man.
huh?
Multiple layers.
Multiple layers. And so this is the part where she finally accepts it.
It's funny. I just realized the guy that was bringing the Spirit of Destiny, his name was
Mhm.
Miguel.
Michael. Yep. And the archangel. Yep.
Yep.
So yeah, again, all written into the story. Constantine, and I always like. I think that's the one thing that got me like so into this movie to begin with was the fact they named it Constantine, and knowing the story behind the pagan emperor that converted to Christianity on his deathbed, right, in order to unite a kingdom. Like all of this was written.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie was made to cause people to question their faith.
Honestly, yes. You're not far off. Constantine was a graphic novel before it was a movie, right?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
So, in fact, even I think it was after the movie, but there was a TV series. It only had one season, but it was an amazing season. There was even a petition to bring back this entire series. Netflix was talking about buying it, but they never did. But yeah, the storyline, you always have to look at any sort of popular source of media and take it with a grain of salt, especially when it comes to fiction. I feel like, especially in the times that we live in these days, I just feel like a lot of our opinions or people's opinions are trying to manipulate them, trying to force them in certain directions. And
And it's been that way since the beginning of time, right? So
yeah,
this is not a new thing. There's just nowadays with the internet and social media, it's easier to manipulate people than it was historically. Right?
yeah,
But yeah, I agree. And so that's one of the things I love so much about this movie is it gives you that alternative perspective, if you want to put it that way, to start asking questions. And look, the reality is there are plenty of people who have their faith who will watch this and their faith will not be shaken because they can accept all of this as being valid fact and still have their faith intact afterwards.
right.
And that's fine. I'm not going to begrudge somebody that. But I think this is also trying to get people to question things in general, right? Which is always a good thing. There's nothing bad with it. So yeah, that scene, again, this scene is where it pulls it together as she's now accepted the fact that her sister did in fact commit suicide, is in fact in hell. And now we're trying to figure out what can we do in this scenario. There were some other scenes that I thought were pretty interesting as well. So do you remember the one where, and I would call this the scene where she begins to open her mind, which is goes with Constantine, and they're having this discussion in the SUV about,
When they go out to the street,
yeah, they're going on the street. So they're having this conversation about God and the devil, and he's talking about the kid with the ant farm and all that kind of stuff. And then they go out in the street, and then all of a sudden the lights just start out.
they hear stuff first, right?
Yeah, they hear it first.
She's like, they start hearing wings flopping in the air, and she's like, "What's that?" He's like, "Wings, maybe talons." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "They're not here for me." And he's like, "You're positive your sister wouldn't have killed herself?" She's not in a million years. And then that's when the lights start. And he's, "Let's find out." And then so that's actually the scene, I believe, right before they go to the apartment, and then they do the thing, right?
Yep,
But at
it
that
is.
point, it's like the lights just fade out into this, and it's cool because where they're standing, there's a statue like a Virgin Mary.
Yeah,
That's
there's a
behind
grotto
him, and it was
across
like
the
it was
street. Yeah,
grotto, and it's right behind him, and it's the only thing that is the source of light where they're standing at now.
right.
While hearing all these things, and he wraps this uh cloth around his. I still don't know what the cloth was, but I believe it.
It was a It was either a handkerchief or a tie or something.
And he like poured liquid all over it to light it and make it light on fire. When the engulfing of the fire lights up the sky, like you see all like hundreds of demons all
Yep.
around there, just coming down to pounce on top of them. But yeah, man, that's a great scene.
It was excellent. And then after, like you said, the light from his wrist alone just illuminates everything, and then they vaporize, right? Because they get consumed by the light or whatever. And then the lights come back on all over the street, right? They come back on, nothing ever happened. And then she just like leans against the wall and yaks because the sulfur got her.
Yeah,
He's like, sulfur happens every time. And like, she's what? And yeah. And then they go on the apartment and they have that scene. that was also another. That's why I said like this movie was just so good because each of these scenes was just so packed with. Um, there's another scene that, as a matter of fact, comes to mind. I'm a huge fan of the Nightmare Before Christmas, the Tim Burton movie. That was his magnum
Uh-oh.
opus right there. But specifically one character in the movie, which is Oogie Boogie. And I love the scene where Constantine is like walking, trying to cross the street, and that the demon that's the bugs or whatever,
Bugs, yeah.
are like, I forget what he tells him. It's watch your back, Exorcist, or something like that. And then he shakes the thing, and he has the scarab beetle
Mm,
in the matchbox,
again,
and
yeah.
that causes it to fall apart. That was a great scene too.
Yeah.
And
I
there is
hated
some,
the effects that they had to do on that with all of the individual little bugs
yeah,
everywhere.
Oogie Boogie right there, right? That's what that was.
You know, I've never seen Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh man, it's an excellent movie.
I've heard nothing
Obviously, it's
about it.
animated Tim Burton.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. But that's another thing I wanted to point out and draw a similarity between two scenes, right? So like the scene where he has that, and then there's the scarab beetle, and Beeman tells him that the scarab beetle is nails on a chalkboard to the undead or to the demons. Scarab beetles have a long history, specifically in Egyptian history.
Well, didn't they say that he
And
got it from the impures from the River Jordan?
exactly, which came from that part of the world, right? They have a long history, and where they pop up a lot is in ancient Egyptian history, right? That also ties back to the scene with the cat where he's holding the cat in front of him, and he tells her something like they're half in, half out. And ancient Egyptians believed that cats lived simultaneously in the current world and the afterlife, right? And that they could be in both at the same time.
That makes sense. Because if you really think about it, it's simply just ghosts as a whole are simply a version of energy that we are not able to see with our human eyes. Now, from a scientific level, if a cat is capable of seeing that spectrum of light, then technically, yes, a cat would be able to live in the life and death world at the same time because they'll be able to see the dead or whomever
Exactly.
is floating around.
Exactly. And so they were revered in ancient Egypt because supposedly they had these supernatural abilities or whatever. I found it interesting that they had both the scarab beetle and the cat, as like the cat was the conduit that got them between. And of course, it wasn't just the cat. Like the water is another thing that historically has been talked about as a conduit between worlds.
It's a conductor of electricity. About it.
It is. It's a conductor of electricity. It's a conduit, a universal solvent, right? So like it has all these other properties, right? And water carries a lot of symbolism in this movie too. And that's actually where I want to go next with the next couple of scenes, right? So we talk about the feet in the water. There's the scene in the swimming pool in the hospital towards the end. We'll come back to that because that's towards the end of the movie. But the other thing is, you remember when he goes to visit Papa Midnight.
Yeah.
That was one.
Oh, yeah. He's want a little flavor? He's no.
Yeah.
He spits on it and he gives him the yeah. Do you want to talk about the chair?
Talk about that scene because that scene was excellent. The one where they use the chair. So he goes to Papa Midnight where Papa Midnight doesn't want to help him because Papa Midnight like, hey, I'm impartial to this, right? Hey, the balance. Like he keeps talking about the balance, right? And Constantine, screw the balance or whatever he tells him. He wants to use the chair.
One time at one point too.
Yeah. So he wants to use the chair. So talk about that where he goes in and then the actual scene where he uses the chair.
So he goes in. What the chair is an electric chair that was used as second to execute prisoners.
Insane.
So there's the souls of these criminals, hundreds of souls have passed through this chair. So it itself has become a charged item. He goes in there and he's like, all right, so I need to use the chair. He's like, tell me this is not about a girl. And he's like, it's mostly not about a girl. I love that. So he's like, all right, cool. So he goes and sits in the chair, takes his shoes off. The same premise as the bowl with the water. And he finds a lamp and he just breaks the glass outside of the light bulb. So it just leaves the
filament.
The filament, right? And then so it's still lit. And then he spits the alcohol on the ground, rams the filament light bulb into the combustible liquid, and thus catalyzing the chair into a supernatural journey.
Yeah, so he basically electrocutes Constantine, right?
Yeah.
But now, why did he want to use the chair? What does he get out of using the chair?
So wasn't he supposed to? He was a matter of seeing where he was trying to see where the girl was, right? Where Angela was, because at this point she'd already been kidnapped. They were already at the building. She gets sucked through the walls. and taken out.
Yeah, he was trying to find her, right?
Yeah,
And so he knew that it was a demon that had taken her, or the devil or whatever. And so that was his way of
trying
locating.
to find this like supernatural honing beacon to see if he could find her. But in doing so, he actually sees Miguel with the Spear of Destiny, and he finds the hospital where she's at.
And I think he knows the story even from the Bible from hell. Like he's, oh no, this is what they're trying to
This is
do.
what they're trying to do. Yeah,
So I
I
think
think he already figured out what the deal was. So I think Beeman had already been killed, so that means Beeman has already told him about.
yeah, Beeman had already told him, but I think this is the point where he realized like all the pieces were on the board now.
Oh yeah,
Right? The things were set in motion, and he's, oh man, this is no longer we're not piecing this together anymore. All the pieces are on the board and everything's moving. And so he had to figure out what it was going to be.
Yeah.
And no, I'm going to skip over a bunch of other scenes here because we're already over an hour in.
I know that's what your plan was to begin with.
That wasn't my plan, honest to God, it wasn't. Okay. I'm going to fast forward towards the end of the movie so we can bring
you're talking about the devil
thing to a closure, but then I want to do some honorable mention scenes too. Because there were some ones that were really cool the way they did them, but they weren't necessarily like major plot points, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he gets in the chair, he figures out what's going on, and he like knows where he needs to go, right? So he then gets his buddy, what's his name? Is it Chad or Chaz or
Chaz?
To go with him, right? Not to go with him because he's the taxi driver. Right?
Yeah, because like originally what was going on is that he wasn't going to help him because I think he feels that Chaz is still experienced to do it. He doesn't want to put him in a dangerous situation. That's really what it was.
Which unfortunately he was right.
Hindsight's 2020, man.
He had foresight too, right? Okay, look, you're an adult. You're gonna make your own decision here. He warned him not to do it, but
he did it. Papa Midnight told him, he's John, put him out, let him do it. And he's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, he died.
Yeah. So he figures out where it's at. He goes to the hospital, right? He gets Chaz to take him. They obviously do their preparations, right? Because they know there's going to be these possessed people, these demons in there, like all this other stuff happens. But I want to get to the scene, and then obviously, as we mentioned, Chaz meets an unfortunate demise, and people can watch the movie to see how that happens or whatever. But what I want to talk about is the part where, again, water, right, being the universal solvent and the conduit, right, becomes important here. So they've obviously kidnapped her. They've kidnapped Angela. They've taken her into the hospital. Gabriel has her, right? And they're waiting on the Spear of Destiny to get there so they can do the ritual. And it's so powerful the way this scene is written because when a child is born, right, or conceived, by the way, it wasn't lost on me that the angel Gabriel in the Immaculate Conception, this was literally upside down version of the Immaculate Conception story at this point.
Okay.
Because the angel Gabriel's announcing that, remember in the Immaculate Conception story, the angel Gabriel announces to Mary that she is going to be pregnant with a son who is going to be basically the king of man. It's Jesus, obviously, right? Is assisting in the birthing of the son of the devil into the world by way of water being the universal conduit, because typically when a woman is pregnant, the fetus is in a sack of water, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And then the water breaks and et cetera, et cetera. Everyone knows that part. But this is like the way they wrote this is just so good. So we get to the hospital. We're in the scene here. Gabriel has the Spear of Destiny at this point. Angela's there. She's completely unconscious. The son of the devil's inside her stomach. You can see it. Right? Constantine comes in. Mike, take us from this point to just bring us to the ending, to close us out. How do we get from the ritual is starting to we get to the end of the movie?
So Gabriel's got her Angela there. Angela's unconscious, lying on the ground, soaking wet. Poor lady's going to be freezing cold at this point. Just saying. Gabriel's holding her right here. You got her hand right here in his arm or her arm, and he has the Spear of Destiny in his hand, and he's in mid stab, and he goes, ah! And all of a sudden, just like before, in terms of time dilation and the time of hell versus time of earth, time stops, time slows down.
You're talking about, but what you didn't talk about is why time stops.
Why time stops?
But the point is, you are right. So this ritual is about to happen, and as you said, Gabriel's coming down with the Spear of Destiny, and then time stops.
Time stops.
There's a reason time stops.
There's a reason time stops, yeah. So, come back to Constantine. Constantine and Gabriel had their own little altercation, and Gabriel tells,
okay, fair, right?
Yeah. He says, look, I'm going to do this. You can't stop me. Just get out of my way. Constantine goes to another room smacks against this glass door, and he's just there defeated while he knows that his chick is about to get probably sacrificed. The son of the devil is about to get entered into the world, and Gabriel's there helping the whole thing happen. So he's, how do I fix this? What do I do? He is at his last straw, sees this piece of glass there, and he starts like slitting his wrists. Because one of the things that they told him earlier in the movie was, you're the one soul that the devil would come down to earth or come up to earth to collect himself.
Right.
That
and
is,
one thing I'll point out is, like, in that scene right there where he decides to do it, he's looking at his watch the entire time. And that's how it clicks in his mind. This is how to stop time.
Oh, I never thought about that. That makes sense.
And prevent the ritual from happening, because he's the one soul the devil himself would come to collect.
Also, the one person in the universe that would be able to maybe help him or stop this from happening. It was also mutually beneficial.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
There you go. Machiavelli?
I don't know.
The Prince? Anyway.
Possibly, yeah. That does sound Machiavellian to me.
Yeah.
So you're probably right.
So devil gets there. So Constantine's there. He's like bleeding out. He's just like pale as all hell. Just, he's like, hey. And so the devil gets there. And all of a sudden you see this like dripping ooze with steam, just hot, steamy, nasty black ooze just dripping.
It's the La Brea Tar Pits outfit.
Look at that.
You got the shirt on?
I got this shirt on.
Look, hey, did you plan this?
I did.
Okay. Last time Mike and I were down in LA, he wanted to go visit the La Brea Tar Pits. So we went. Then he got a shirt.
He got a shirt.
Yeah.
So devil.
By the way, the La Brea Tar Pits are there in LA where this movie supposedly takes place.
It just means that we need to go back to LA.
Yeah.
Anyway, so devil's coming down. There's drippy black tar comes down. Now the devil comes out. Do you think the devil? You think of like a red
demon looking,
horns,
tail, hooves, talons.
Dude comes out in this legit white suit, white jacket, white shirt, white pants, white shoes, but also with these like little drips of black tar that are all over him. And it's,
which, by the way, that white suit is exactly like how you would dress a young infant boy who is getting baptized, right? And there's a pool of water right there next to him. So this is almost like a baptismal scene happening here.
You're so deep in the most random things. I swear to God.
20 years in Catholic schools. Yes, I am pretty deep in that lore.
Dang. It's indoctrinated in you, man. Anyway, so Peter Stormare, who was the actor that plays the devil, so he arrives, and of course he tells him, he's like, John, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And he's essentially, long story short, he tells him like, hey, just like, you know, how's the family? Your son's in the next room. He's messing around with Gabriel, the archangel, and they have the Spear of Destiny.
Yeah, but before that, when he says he's in there with Gabriel, he says something like, "No, you can't account for taste," or something like that.
Yeah,
it's so good.
But it's then he mocks him, and he's
the Spear of Destiny.
Yeah. But before that, he was like this moment of concern.
He knows the story. He knows that Bible, right?
Oh,
the Bible from hell. And so the minute they said the Spear of Destiny, he's
it's like some stuff is about to go down.
He doesn't want to let Constantine know that he's concerned, so then he mocks him, right?
It's a classic
mechanism.
Yeah, like an insecure male thing. Like, I'm just going to mock you and make you feel better about myself.
Yeah.
So he tells him that, and he's, hey, you want to come liar? You waited 20 years, 30 years for me. It's another few more seconds. They're in the next room. I'll wait. And then sure enough, he walks into the room and the glass door, and then he walks in and the glass shatters. And
then if you've been with us this long and you like this kind of content, give this video a like and subscribe to our channel, because this is the kind of stuff we love to do, and we're going to be delivering a lot more content like this. Also, if you're a fan of this movie and you just love it to death and you want to discuss it, put it in the comments below. You can also find us on Instagram, so you can tag us there. You can talk to us. We're now on Blue Sky. You can find us there as well. If you go into the description for this video, you will see a link to our link tree, which has links to all of our socials, as well as to our main website. You can also email us directly, ernest@fabulaobscura.com or mike@fabulaobscura.com. But more importantly, if you like this kind of stuff and you've been with us this far and you love this content, share it with friends. Let them know that this podcast is out. Mike and I are trying to grow this channel, grow this community, get more people involved and engaged in these kind of discussions. So anyway, glass shatters, and then what happens?
Glass shatters, and then, like I said, there's no gravity, and there's glass essentially just floating in midair. He walks in, and the devil walks in, and he sees exactly what Constantine had said.
He pulls Angela out of the way as Gabriel's about to drop, and then time unfreezes. She starts calling him names, and then he's, "Oh, I love the old names," or something like that.
Best part of that scene, though, is that when she says, "I will smite thee in his name or in his honor," and she goes for a punch, and he just does not land whatsoever. And
Yeah,
he's
it
just
stops
there
right in front of
waiting.
his face. It stops right in front of his face, and he just like smiles and looks to the side.
Looks like someone doesn't have your back anymore.
Right.
And then boom, he pushes Gabriel back, gets thrown into the pool or the water that's there, right?
The
And then
flames and everything, the wings are burning. And
so essentially, if you know any kind of lore with angels in terms of movies and stuff, whenever you cut the wings off an angel, they become human. And that's just lore. That's just across movies and stuff in general. But when in turn that actually did happen. So then Lucifer essentially burns his wings, leaving him defenseless and mortal, and thus stopping the plan and saving Angela. And and then he pulls up Angela off the ground, and he's talking to his son. He says, "This world is mine for now," and then shoots him back down. And you see the spirit of the demon or whatever get like sucked down into underground into hell. The woman is just there, like alive, and he just throws her to the side. Then he goes back to Constantine, and he's like, "All right, so what do you want? An extension?" And the way he says it,
like an extension on your homework or something.
yeah,
He's so nonchalant about it.
yeah, exactly. So instead, Constantine says, "No, the sister." He says, "I want her to be sent home."
To go to heaven.
Yes, because she killed herself. She went to hell. She's a soul in hell. He's saying, "Screw me. I don't care about me. Just make sure she's taken care of." I love this part when Peter Stormare, he's doing this like, it's like almost he's thinking about it. He's like, "Where's she at? Okay, she's there. Okay, found her." Just like that, right? And he's like, "All right, cool." So he grabs Constantine by the hand. He's like, he's trying to drag his body. He's gonna go to hell, and everything's going. He's just
Now,
whistling like,
before you got to that part, I want to point out one thing here that's also like kind of key to this scene. As you said, Constantine sacrificed himself so that she could go to heaven. Is the mirror image of the story of the Son of God, Christ, sacrificing himself so that humanity could go to heaven.
"That's true."
Constantine is now a Christ figure at this point, right?
Which
Now,
is funny because if you compare that to the Matrix, that's a whole
hey,
other.
hey, we're not crossing streams here, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
you are correct. You're absolutely correct about that, which is, it was not lost on me when this movie was made. But I just wanted to point that out to people that he has done exactly what the Son of Christ came to this earth to do.
yeah,
Before he did this for this girl, and then like you said, now the devil grabs him by the wrist and is ready to haul him off to hell.
exactly. He's pulling him, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he becomes heavier and heavier to pull. And then you look back at it. That's another part. As we're doing these deep dives, I've been gaining a better appreciation for the visual effects in this movie.
Yes, the writing, the cinematography.
The visual effects specifically, because right now myself, I'm going through this whole Blender hyperfixation. I'm trying to teach myself Blender, and seeing these effects and knowing the steps that these professional
As an artist, yeah.
that they went through. Mind you, this was 20 years ago, and then to be able to pull that off now, I can do that here on my laptop. But 20 years ago, that was some like multi-million-dollar. Anyway, I digress. So he's pulling him, right, and as he's pulling him, the ground underneath him is starting to fold like a blanket, like a cloth that's being like tugged. It's just folding in on itself in a way, and it's like the devil can't pull him anymore. And he's, "What's going on?" He looks back, and all of a sudden it's like when this light comes up behind Constantine, and like this, it's almost like this portal, because you can see these buildings and like this peaceful landscape area or whatever. The devil simply replies with, "Surprise, right? The sacrifice." That's what he says. So essentially, because John Constantine sacrificed his own life, his own soul at that point for the sister's soul, God saw that and said, "You know what? You did it, bro. You crossed the T, you marked the I, you got the job done.
You earned it.
Then the devil's, no, I don't think so. He grabs him
Yeah.
as he's being like elevated and delivered onto heaven, and is after
Which by the way, let me pause you again, and I'm sorry I'm interjecting again. That scene where Constantine is, uh, as you said, being lifted. This is again their interpretation of the ascension of Jesus Christ after he rises from the dead. He ascends into heaven, right?
Right.
So, but my favorite part of that scene is where, as he's flying away, he turns around and he looks back at the devil.
He throws the
And
finger.
he throws him the finger. Oh, it's so.
Yes.
And then go ahead with the rest of it. Yeah.
He's just Constantine is at this point. He's like, man, I'm dead. I'm good. I'm done. I did my job. I'm going home. I'm tired. I'm gonna take a nap. Right. But then the devils know you're coming. You're not taking away this one from me. And he tells him, he says, I'm gonna keep you here. And he grabs him and he digs his fingers into his lungs. He says, I want you to stay on earth long enough to prove that your soul belongs with me. So he takes his lungs out and he gives him new lungs, and he's now completely cancer free. And which I'm just saying that would be really cool, because if you really like smoking, then you can essentially just start over all again and like fresh.
Yeah, so he sticks his hands in there and he basically removes the cancer and gives him life back. And then he like whispers into his ear, he's like, "You will." Basically, exactly what you're saying though, because he is certain that Constantine's going to screw up again and end up going to hell. What?
So where he was supposed to be.
But that's a huge bet though, because if you think about it, the reason that Constantine was going to go to hell to begin with was the suicide, right?
Right.
So he's making a bet that Constantine is going to commit a major sin or something again to warrant him going to hell a second time. And I don't know, man, like maybe, sure. But given the guy's history and everything he went through to this point, I feel like he's going to walk on a straight path from here on.
I would like to think that he learned his lesson. I'm going to go into botany now and then plant some trees in the back.
Yeah, I'm going to get into gardening. Yeah, that was so good. And then obviously Constantine lives because the devil wants him to screw up again and end up in hell and all that kind of good stuff. Now we go to, that's basically the end of the movie, but there are some scenes that happen after that. So one of my favorites, so I called them the honorable mention scenes earlier. There's quite a few of them actually in this movie.
Okay.
The next one is the one where he goes back and Gabriel's there. Remember?
Oh yeah, right after that he goes back and she's, John, you've done well for yourself. You've won. You've been great. No, you want to smite me. And she comes out with a gun. Kill me now, please.
Yeah. And then he just takes it and pops her in the face with it. And she's, that's pain. She's now immortal, right? So that's the first time she's ever felt pain. And then, of course, there's like a scene later where he reunites with her and he tells her to hide the spear of destiny to where even he can't find it.
That part bothered me.
I didn't like that part for a few reasons, but one of them is that goes back. There's a saying, right? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? Again, this calls back to the Lord of the Rings where Gandalf doesn't want to take the ring from Frodo. He tells him to hide it. And there's like this ongoing theme that these objects that have absolute power, the kind of people that can abuse that kind of power don't want it, right? Who know better, right? Whereas the tyrants and autocrats are looking for these things, right? So it's the juxtaposition between good and evil. So you're right. I didn't like it either, simply because who knows where she's going to put the thing. And she's not immortal. So it's going to pop up again at some point, right? What I would have said is take it to a forge and liquefy it or something. Don't hide it. That doesn't solve anything.
Just take it to the church. They're going to just give it back to them and say, look.
That, or for me, I would have wanted them to complete the whole Lord of the Rings arc here and take it to Mount Doom.
Or the volcano.
Put in the volcano. Have a whole scene about that, right? But that was like, that's what I call an honorable mention scene. The one with Gabriel, they popped her in the face. That was really good. The other one I want to call out is going all the way back to the very beginning of the movie. Honorable mention scene is the one where the girl's possessed.
Oh, yeah.
That was an amazing scene.
That was creepy as hell.
So tell us a little bit about that one, and it's specifically like the mirror part of that.
Okay, so at this point, there's a girl, a teenager. She's possessed with some kind of a demon. They're in like an apartment, and the neighbors, I guess, are hearing the commotion. They all come to help. So there's all these people in this small apartment. Constantine gets there, and he looks at her and realizes that it's like a higher level demon than what he's used to. And he's, I need a mirror, a big one. go. And then the next thing, there's this big mirror. I guess they like throw rope or something. They tie a rope around them, which I thought that was odd the way they did that.
They had to suspend it above the bed.
Yeah, but they're holding it. There's 4 guys on the sides holding the mirror.
Yeah, I think the rope was to get it out the window.
Again, they're holding the mirror.
You saw where it got stuck, right?
What did you really see that though? That was a silly scene. That whole scene was weird. The way they threw the mirror out, that bothered me because it was like, here's a hole and here's the mirror and it will go through. Let me just do this. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie about that. But that was a really good scene though, where he catches it in the mirror.
It was still a great scene because he tells these guys he's trying to do prayers. He's trying to get this demon out of the girl this entire time. There's all kind of crazy commotion going on. He tells him specifically, don't look in the mirror, whatever you do. And of course, there's always that one guy poke his eyes open. He's, what's going on? And he looks in seconds, like his entire head just turns white.
Yeah,
his hair
is white immediately.
Yeah. And that was creepy because you got to wonder, what did he see? What caused that to happen so drastically?
I mean, I guess he saw hell. I don't know what he saw, but yeah, you're right. It was interesting. But I like the way they crafted the scene where he gets on top of the girl and he's like using the stuff to try to like burns it into her forehead so that the demon doesn't realize they have the mirror. And then he gets off and all of a sudden the demon sees it and sees itself.
It's vanity as a sin.
Right.
He sees itself and he wants to. He's enamored by himself, his own reflection. So he's just there. And then that's when they throw the mirror out the window and
it lands on the taxi cab.
Yeah, exactly.
That was so good. And Chaz is like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
So that's an honorable mention scene. I love that scene. And then, because these are more funny than anything. The other one I really love is you remember when the first time they went to Papa Midnight's Club and Chaz is with him and he goes in and he's like 2 rats in a dress or 2 frogs in a bench or whatever the hell it was. Yeah. And they get in and then they go do their thing. And then the second time Chaz tries to get in because Constantine tells him, yeah, you can come in if you can get in. And of course he can't get in, right? Because he doesn't know, he can't see the opposite side of the card, which is another thing. This is why I keep saying like this movie was so expertly written because it's almost like everything in this movie was literally highlighting 2 sides of the same coin. And so Constantine could see the other side of the card, even though he wasn't looking at it, right?
Right.
Which obviously Chaz couldn't. My favorite part, they go back the second time and the guy tries to stop him and he just pops him and knocks him out. And then Chaz is standing over him. He's, who's a rat in a dress now?
So the scene when he's doing the electrocution, the chair, right? In order for him to be able to see this, he has to a certain degree, die, right? Now go back to when Angela wants to see the other world, this other side, but in order to do that, he has to take her to the bathtub and drown her. Well, she has to die a little bit in order for her to fully be able to see. And in that split second she was gone, she saw Balthazar's coin. She saw something about Beeman. I forgot what she saw, but she was there for that whole time. But again, it was a similar situation in that she's able to see hell now. He physically went to hell to a certain degree.
Yeah, she has to, in order for you to see the other world, you have to pass through. And the only way to pass through
is to die.
Is to technically die.
And then come back. Right.
Fully die, right? But yeah, that makes sense. And again, I'll point out, I'm glad you brought that scene up, right? Your water, right? The conduit, right? The universal conduit and the universal solvent for that matter. Another scene I want to call out that I thought was like just expertly done was the one where the priest ends up dying on the floor of the liquor store.
Oh, his friend.
Obviously, the priest is, I guess you would call it sensitive or whatever. Like he knows what's going on and he can see the other side of the other world.
There's power or whatever.
And that scene was expertly done because like Balthazar's in there, obviously, right? And this whole scene goes down and like he's sitting there and he's trying to drink and he can't, and then obviously he ends up dying from that. What I thought was really cool was that priest clearly dies from like alcohol poisoning, right? As a result of this entire thing that goes on. That character, that character's name in the movie is Father Hennessy.
Oh, and I think I knew that.
Yeah.
Never put two together though.
In a liquor store for overconsumption of,
and his name is Hennessy.
Father Hennessy. Yeah, that was a really good that was a good scene too. And then speaking of Balthazar, the other scene I really liked is the one where he's gonna exorcise him, right? And he goes through like the whole thing to get information out of him. And then he tells him, because he's threatening to send him to heaven is what he's doing, right? That actually scares him. Whereas like everyone else wants to go to heaven, this guy doesn't. because it's kind of like when you're a pedophile and you get put in general population in prison, right? That's the vibe you're getting there. So he's afraid that he's going to get, I don't know what's going to happen to him. But the point is, he does all that. And then at the end, John tells him, yeah, in order for you to be saved, you actually have to confess your sins and atone or whatever, which Balthazar was clearly never going to do because he's the demon. So the whole thing was a farce, is what he was trying to tell him. And Balthazar fell for it.
He's trying to tell them what they're trying to do. And he's like, you already did. You helped me accomplish my task. You brought her to me. You brought the powerful sidekick. That was my only thing I needed to do. And then he shoots him. And he's like, fire. I was bored of this. That was like my favorite line.
Yep. That was another good scene. And then I think I'll wrap it up here on another honorable mention scene. It's the one where Beeman's demise. Let's put it that way. Do you want to tell us about Beeman's demise?
It's funny because I mean, he's a bug guy. He just likes bugs, but then he ends up being essentially like eaten alive from the inside out from bees. Yep. Which I mean, I think Balthazar that did that.
Balthazar did that one too.
Yeah.
So that's that was an interesting scene where it was just weird how they did it. Like the bowling alley, the machinery's all going, and then he's like reading from that Bible, and he knows that Balthazar's there, but he can't see him, and then
he knows something's there, right?
Obviously, he ends up dying, and then when Constantine gets there, he finds Balthazar's coin in the grate on the floor,
which Angela had actually seen in her little brief psychic moment when she went under the water.
Yeah,
because she kept doing the thing with her finger, because that's what he did with the coin. He made the coin like roll over his fingers.
Yeah,
that was something that Balthazar did.
And I'm sure there's another biblical reference there for Balthazar and the coin. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head.
Probably.
I mean, could probably go look it up. It probably had to do something with the money changers that were in the synagogue when Jesus went and turned over the tables and stuff like that.
Well, maybe it was a silver coin or something.
Judas' silver coin. Yep. Or it's 40 coins or whatever. I don't remember anymore. But yes, there was so much packed into this movie. And so this is a great movie overall. And I know it's your favorite movie.
One of them.
It's definitely one of my favorite movies. And so, yeah, I think it's time to go ahead and bring this thing to a close because we've been talking about this for over an hour. So suffice it to say, if you have not seen this movie before, you should see it. Even if you listened to all of this and gotten all the spoilers, it's still an excellent movie on many levels. Mike, are there any parting thoughts you want to give to our listeners and viewers before I bring it in here for a landing?
Hug your moms. Give them hugs. Even if you don't want to, go hug your mom.
Exactly, because that was not an immaculate conception as to how you got onto this planet, but still, you should do that.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, otherwise, we've said a couple of times, we both love this movie. We hope you love it too. If you've made it this far to the end, definitely, I think we've earned a like at this point, maybe earned a subscribe.
I think so.
Just to remind you, the podcast releases on YouTube officially every single episode, but we do release the video version of it as well as the audio version on Spotify. So if you're finding us in some other way through one of our socials or something else, we have both. So if you're not really a YouTube person, you can watch the video version on Spotify. You can get the audio version on Spotify as well. And that also goes to all of the other podcast catchers out there. So Apple Podcasts and any other podcast platform, publishing to all of them. If you happen to use a specific platform and you don't see it there yet, please let us know, and I will try to figure out how to get it published there. Now, how do you get a hold of us? There's many different ways. Leave comments, comment section below. Please do that. Let us know what you think about this movie, whether you loved it, whether you didn't, what your favorite scene was in the movie, your favorite actor or actress. It doesn't matter. We love to hear about this. You can leave it in the comments below. As far as socials, we are on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and Blue Sky. You can find us across all of those. If you go into the bios, I have our link tree. Our link tree links to all of our socials, the places where you can find our podcast. It links to our merch store. We have a really cool shirt that Mike designed with our Fabula Obscura logo on it. You can buy it directly from the merch store. You can also buy it directly from us. You can send me an email directly, ernest@fabulaobscura.com. You can email Mike at fabulaobscura.com. We can sell you one directly too. I'll send you a thing through PayPal if you want to do it that way. But the biggest thing you can do for us is to let your friends and family know if they're interested in this type of content. The word of mouth is literally the most powerful advertising thing on this planet. And Mike and I are working to grow this channel and grow this community. So please let friends and family know. Otherwise, we thank you for the privilege of your time for this very long episode, and we will catch you in the next one.
Thank you, guys.